So briefly, I want to take this time to welcome everybody to coachaway.org. So as I
Yeah.
sat down, I thought about you because you've
Mm.
walked through a journey, that has been so difficult, and yet you've overcome with so much bravery and so happy and joyful. And that's why I thought, why don't I just call you and then we can have this interview to be able to help many others. And I've had a privilege of working with Therese, and one of the things that I'm proud about is just God linking us because I've seen her change and grow tremendously. So I will allow her to introduce herself and give you the full details of who she is. So please welcome. Let us know who you are.
Hi everyone. My name is Therese Maju. I was born in Cameroon. It's in the west of Africa, and I didn't really grow up at home. I moved when I was 10 to live in South Africa, and then I did my primary school, high school here, and then we had to relocate to Kenya again. And then I did my university and a few years of my adulthood in Kenya. And then we had to relocate again to South Africa. Yeah, I'm a mother to a lovely 11-year-old. He's my whole world. Um, I'm a sister, hopefully a wife to be soon.
Yeah.
So I'm also a fashion entrepreneur. Um, but I studied counseling in school, in university. I have a degree in counseling psychology. Yeah, I went to school in UNN and it was rough. It was so rough in UNN, but
Yeah.
we made it through and I graduated. Um, I really enjoyed studying psychology back then, and I really wanted to be a therapist. But then
Mhm.
life happened, and then I realized that the only reason why I wanted to be a therapist is because of my past. And I eventually went into dance. Dance was my side hustle along the way. While I was in university, it was my side hustle. I used to teach ballet, and I was in a theater group while in UON, and it was amazing. I think that is where I started doing my healing. I didn't realize how dance can be so healing when it's done right, but also it can be so messy when it's done wrong. So
Mm,
I learned lots of lessons being in the entertainment industry in Kenya.
mm, mm,
It's definitely not a place I would advise anyone to be in. Yeah, I don't think I would want anyone, even my worst enemy, to be in that industry because in order to succeed, you really have to sacrifice parts of yourself that you can never really get back. Um,
mm,
and then COVID happened, and then I had to stop dancing. I had to stop everything, and that is when the real work began.
mm.
And so, yeah, that's basically it. Right now, I am applying for my master's in Christian counseling psychology, of course, inspired by Uncle Charles. um,
Wow, I'm glad.
really praying I get in. I'm really praying I get in. But yeah. Oh, I was saying right now I am an entrepreneur. I'm self-employed. It's not necessarily the best because of the things happening in the world right now. There's no quote unquote money. But I
Mm,
said if God thought I could be a business person, then who am I to say that? Excuse me, who am I to say that my business won't succeed?
mm,
So we are making strides, baby steps, but an empire wasn't built can't be built in a day. So yeah, that's where I am now. Ah,
Oh,
that's
thank you. Thank you so much. It's good to hear those nice words. An empire was never built in a day. It takes one stone on top of
yeah,
another, indeed, to build even a building, however tall as the building could be. And
yeah,
of course, with a lot of changes, with a lot of
yeah,
prayers, God open ways.
mm,
So
mm,
welcome. I'm so great to hear that you are inspired to want to do a biblical counseling. Please join me in helping as many as possible. Yeah, and so briefly, one of the reasons why we're doing this interview is because currently, as it is, our young people are hurting, many marriages are hurting, and you find that people are not willing to seek for counseling or therapy or psychiatrists for help because there's a culture that has been inculcated in our tradition in our community that
mm,
makes Christians feel like if I go for counseling, then I'm weak. If I
mm,
go for therapy, then I'm sinful. And yet, the Bible says it is God who made some to be apostles, some, to be doctors, some to be pastors. And so God has given humanity different gifts to be able to enable them to live life to the full in Jesus Christ, but yet we don't make use
yeah,
of this. One of the most
yeah,
inspirational scriptures is when Jesus says, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will care for you. I will give you help. I'll wipe away your tears." And
mm,
people still feel like Jesus Christ needs to come in the
mm,
physical body while forgetting that Jesus
mm,
Christ uses fellow human beings to bring
yeah,
about the. And so
mm,
briefly, could you share with us just your experience? What are some of the things? I know you mentioned about your past that, brought you to me. One, your past also that inspired you to want to do psychology and counseling. And so could you share briefly, what are some of the things you've gone through in life?
mm. Well, if I start from early on, uh, I was molested as a child. I think when I was 4 years old, that is when everything started. And I only realized later that actually that wasn't right. What the things that happened, being left alone with cousins and aunties and all of that. I wish the adults knew better because I think a lot of my cousins and the people who I was around that time, the kids, I think we all sort of for lack of a better word, molested each other, and then the adults, those who were put in charge of us, molested us in the process as well because we were exposed to so much sexual um content as kids because the adults were always away working. So if I just start from there, I think that is where a lot of my problems started. A lot of my problems started there. Yeah.
Mm,
And
wow.
then having not grown up with my parents around actually all of my life, um, yeah, also that is quite traumatic for a child. I don't think we realize how the absence of a parent and being left with caretakers can really affect a child, especially I think both male and female. But
Mm.
yeah, I don't think we realize how it can really affect a child and their ability to sort of love themselves and feel loved. Um, then when I was 6, 7, yeah, around 7 or 8, I was left with a caretaker who was very abusive, physically, mentally, the whole shebang. Um, I think that's also where a lot of my shameless, like not having shame comes from because I was put in so many situations that sort of degraded me as a human being.
And so
Um,
when you talk about not having shame, meaning that even that which was supposed to bring you down emotionally, played, you looked at it positively, and it also built you into a better person, even
Yeah.
though the past also had its own negative effects. Yeah, continue,
Yes.
please.
Yeah. So I was left with a caretaker who was very abusive. And I remember this one event that still to date, it brings shivers down my spine thinking about it, is she believed that I was a witch and that I was causing her pain and sort of like what is it called? Her arm, one side of her body had these rashes and they were swollen a lot of the time and it was really itchy for her. And so she blamed me. And this particular day, she made me stand. Okay, back home, before gates and all these things happened, the entrance to a house was basically open, like the compound was an open area. Anyone could walk in, walk out whenever, because there were farms on the sides of the house. And because of that, we didn't really have gates like we do now. So she made me stand in front of our house. And the funny thing is that our house was at the end of the street and it faced the whole road. So she made me stand in front of the entrance of the house naked for a whole day, telling me that I'm gonna stand there until the rash on her hand goes away. And I stood there the whole day under the hot sun. And oh, that was the worst. Imagine a 7-year-old girl. I matured really fast. So everything was already growing. And I was standing there the whole day naked for the whole town to see me, passers-by to see me in my nakedness because she believed that I was a witch and I was the cause of her, her illness. And after that, because the thing didn't go away, she beat me black and blue because the thing didn't go away. And it's only when I got older that I realized that this lady was actually the witch and not me. And I remember having a conversation with my brother one day, and he was like, he actually had multiple dreams of her turning into a snake. And I was like, oh, that makes sense, that this person was actually a witch and was just put there by Satan to ridicule my life and put me in a place where I don't want to be human anymore because that is very dehumanizing. And
Wow.
right now, in the laws of today, if you do that to a child, you can be put in jail. You're breaking a law. And nobody did anything, which was such something that I despise about Africans.
So
We
even the
let
neighbors, no one
no one,
intervened at
no
all.
one did anything.
Did you ever tell your mother about the whole story?
No.
You never
Now that's the
spoke to
other
her.
thing.
What were you fearing? Why didn't you talk to her about it?
I couldn't. When I moved, I eventually moved. My father eventually came and picked me up and like came to take me to come to South Africa with him because one of the reasons why I never lived with them is because they were hustling. They were trying to give us a better life. So my father was always away, and my mom had me so young. She also did not sort of know how to be a mom. So she was also hustling. She was trying to make something out of herself. So she was away a lot of the time. Even now, she's always away, which is something I've made peace with. And we fight about it sometimes where she'd be like, you need to go to school. And I'm like, I'm not leaving my child. No way. I'll sacrifice and stay, whatever sacrifices I need to make, but I must be with him until he's old enough to at least be alone, which for me is never, but but yeah. um yeah, when
Mm.
he came and took me away from that situation, um I started having a lot of nightmares about what happened to me back in that house. And my my parents said that it's not important and that it's in the past. They've taken me away from that situation and I must just get over it. That's how they dealt with it. So I never really got a chance to talk about it. Even now, I don't think I've ever actually talked about it with her. I think I should do that today. Anyway, I've never gotten a chance to talk about it. And even when I do, when I talk about some things, she doesn't have the capacity to sort of embrace me in that manner and really empathize with me. So yeah, I've also had to work through that because I've noted that it's not her fault. That's just how she was brought up. She also practically raised herself, so she doesn't have a lot of qualities that a healthy parent should have.
So simply, she was simply doing parenting you the way she was parented. She knew nothing better. And so
Yes.
even as much as you want to blame her, there's nothing much you can do. Wow. I think it's just a caution for the parents who allow their children to be raised up, by uncles, by aunties. These houses where you have many people staying in the house. It's just a caution that is good to take. Yeah, and so I would want you to go back. At that particular moment as you're on the street, what was going through your mind? Were you wishing that your mom would just surface, your dad would surface from somewhere to come and pick you? What was going through your mind that remains to date with you?
I think because um, not living with my parents at all and not being able to really express myself and the way that the lady treated me, it was very manipulative, narcissistic, and just, it's true that people who are bad to the core, they isolate you from everything that showed you love, that was good for you. They isolate you, which is what she did. She took away my education. Um, my extended family, my grandmother, who I was staying before I moved to stay with her, nobody was allowed to see me or my brother. Like nobody from our family was allowed to see us. That isolation trained me to be numb and sort of disassociate myself from the situation and build castles in the air just to
Mm,
not feel the pain and not to feel so alone, which was what I felt a lot of the time, was being alone, um, and not feeling loved or wanted. Because I remember running away multiple times. I ran away, I think 3 times in a year. Like we stayed with
mm,
her for about a year or two, but I remember running away multiple times. And till date, I always say, I was even saying to my mom the other day, I know that God is real. I have seen his power, his protection in my life because having grown up by myself, nobody ever really protected me from life. And being a female child, you're exposed to so many things that you're not supposed to be exposed to at that tender age. And I was exposed to a lot of things. And because of that, I always found myself in situations that I shouldn't have been in, that if someone advised me differently, I would have known better. And I remember one time I ran away and I ended up at my teacher's house. My teacher was a man, and anything could have happened in his house because I think I stayed with him for like 2 days. And then he said to me, "You have to go back home." He took me back home after 2 days. He said, "I can't stay with you. You're my student, and people will start saying things, and I don't want to lose my job." And I was like, "Of course, it's understandable." Even at that young age, I understood what he meant. So he eventually took me back home. But staying with a man an 8-year-old, a 7-year-old who is growing up too fast. Anything could have happened, but nothing did. And I thank God that nothing did, because it still gave me a glimmer of hope in humanity, that despite the fact that this person could have done everything wrong to me, he chose to protect me and take care of me as if he knew me, even though he didn't.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
yeah, I think,
So even though the world is fallen, we still have a few good men, people who fear God, and like you said, anything could have happened. You never know. Yeah, for a child, I'm trying to imagine you running. You're running away to where? You understand, Yeah, it is so traumatizing, and I don't know how has that affected you. Do you find in your life, even as you've grown older, you're still running away from things? Do you run away from things?
yes, I do, but not as much as I used to. Now I sit down and talk to God about it. Um,
Mm,
yeah, because I think when I began healing, I started sort of, everything started to boil over. So I struggle to keep things in now. So whenever there's an issue, I need to deal with it as fast as possible to get it out of the way. Otherwise, I can't function at all. I can't function.
mm,
It's like it takes me back to that survival mode that is toxic. And
okay,
being in that state of mind is not pleasant because,
okay.
yeah.
Now, you spoke briefly about a sensitive issue. And this is about, witch doctors, about what do you call it?
Mm,
It's an African inherited problem that many people fear. You find even a learned person who's gone to school, and yet they're so well to do, but when they go back home, they fall back into the culture and they fall
mm,
back into the fear of what the witch doctors, the jujus,
mm,
the voodoo. And
mm.
so your auntie, for her to even have done that, is it a problem that maybe you guys had in your family? And if it was a problem, how was that handled? Is there anything else you went through in that voodoo, the cultural, witch doctors practice or exercise? Please go ahead.
Um, I don't, it's not something that we practice in our family, or at least that I'm not aware of, apart from my grandmother dabbling here and there with traditional medicine. I don't necessarily think it's something that we dabble into, but also at the same time, because my parents chose to trust strangers rather than their own flesh and blood, that is how we ended up being exposed to that realm. Because even as my father took me away from that situation, he put me in an even worse position. Um, he did not have a relationship with his parents either, like my mom, and he detested his mother. I don't know about his dad, but he detested his mother. And so, because of that resentment, he met another woman who was a prophetess. Um, back in the 2000, back in 1990, 2000, that time. Even now, she's still doing her thing, but she's hiding somewhere and doing it. She's not going back at home to do it. She's hiding somewhere and doing it. Anyway, um, because he detested his mom, he found someone else to who felt like a mother and hung on to her as if it was his real mother and treated her as such, unknowing that this person is not an actual person from God. And the things that he ended up exposing himself to came back now to us, his children and his wife. And I saw a family that could have made it if the man had been secure in himself as a man and know that he is the head of a household, and the only other head he should be focused on is God. The only other person who can lead him is God. He chose to put all his trust into a woman who is not even his flesh and blood, who claimed to be of God but was not of God. And because of that, there was more manipulation, abuse, physical and emotional, and spiritual abuse, because I think this witchcraft thing is spiritual abuse, using God as a way to manipulate people into doing things that are not human, into doing things that God does not subscribe to. And of course, I only realized all of that when I came out of that situation and began to search God for myself, began asking the questions, began to read the Bible with fresh eyes and a fresh mind. And now I realize, actually, no, this person was also a witch in a way, because the things that happened in our household when she would come and visit were not normal things. And that's not my parents' fault. They just fell trap to something that sounded nice. It sounded appealing. As human beings, we seem to be unable to fathom God's love for us. We only seem to be able to subscribe to God's love when it's told to us by somebody else who says they are from God. And that is what a lot of Christians fall prey to, these fake prophets, is that they would rather someone else tell them about how much God loves them and tell them that God will only love them in a certain way if they do a certain thing, rather than searching God for themselves and realizing that God does not want you to do all these things that these people say you must do in order to earn his love. You cannot earn God's love. It's already yours.
Yeah.
And you cannot earn salvation. It's already yours. You cannot earn Jesus or God. You can't earn those things. It's already yours because he made you and he chose you. It's already yours. And so,
Wow. Wow.
because they were changing all those things, they were unable to see the cycle repeating itself. And on that, now I'm talking about it and I'm realizing the lady they left with us did the same thing. She isolated me. She took away everything from me, like my toys, just to sort of remove the humane part of you. You become bare and just useless to yourself, even. You become almost addicted to the kind of love and affection they're giving you because it seems safe when it's actually not. And that is what that prophetess lady did. She isolated us from our family, and she told my parents that my mother's family were witches and they were trying to ruin their marriage. And because my mom already had a bad relationship with her family, she accepted that. Because also she was looking for a father's love. She followed my father without thinking for herself because he was the only love that she seemed to have been able to receive. And so she settled for what he gave. And unfortunately, I also did that growing up. But
yeah, the Bible says in the book of Hosea, chapter, is it 4, verse 6 or 6, verse 4? My people perish for lack of knowledge. Because you've rejected me, I'll also reject you. So ignorance is one of the greatest killers in our Christian community. And if you take your parent back there, even your mother, they were simply doing what they thought was best
was
for
right.
you. Yeah, but
Exactly.
for them, they had no idea of the biblical power or knowledge that needed to lead and guide them. And it just proved that without God, we are so empty. And so, are there some things that maybe, because I know you've really talked about doing certain things which took away, the human part of you, took away the freedom part of you, Are there particular things that they did that maybe people need to watch out for that you think
Mm.
needs to be, yeah.
Yeah, I
Please go
think
ahead.
the thing that we must pay attention to when we are saying that we're following other people because of our faith, or just even in romantic relationships, the things that we do to make others happy. You must pay attention to how people talk to you, right? The way that someone will say one thing but do another, that is very, that's not it. That's not it. Because this prophetess lady always said one thing but did another. Like, for example, she would talk about how God is important, you know, we must only wear certain colors because it's godly. It's a sin to wear certain colors. It's a sin to take pictures. It's a sin. All these things, she always seemed to have a solution to things that did not need solutions for. But yet, she would still sort of take pictures. She would still sort of wear those colors. She would still um, dehumanize us, but yet still talk about God's love. One way that she messed all of us up is that when she came and lived with us after her husband died, and um she sort of did a cleanup of our home. She burnt all of our pictures, saying that in those memories were traces of witchcraft, which till date I don't understand how that's possible. But anyway, she burned all of our pictures, and she convinced my parents that their extended family is bad for them and only her family is good for us, and that all of our friends, all the things that we do are witchcraft. Basically, that's what she did. So that's another thing to look out for. As human beings, we need certain things in life just to make our life better. God does not expect us to live like Jesus 100%. He gave us things on earth to entertain our minds because our brains are just, they are constantly doing something. So he gives us with fun things to do to keep ourselves human, to keep ourselves happy, because he understands that we can never really be satisfied. She took away all those things. We couldn't go and do activities. Like at school, I wasn't allowed to do so many activities. And even if I did, she would choose what it was. And yeah, we weren't allowed to do a lot of things. I wasn't allowed to hang out with my friends. I wasn't allowed to have little things that children enjoy, sweets, all these things. I was only allowed to have the things that she gave us or that she brought home and said, take, this is for you. We weren't allowed to wear certain clothes unless she said we were allowed to do it. I wasn't allowed to do certain hairstyles because she said I wasn't allowed to do it. So my parents just followed whatever she said that we must do. So be wary of people who sort of demonize human things, the simple things of life. Like she forced my parents to cut my hair, like shave it bald, saying that it will make me more pleasant in God's eyes. And because we were Catholics, she used the holy Jesus's mother as sort of like her anchor. Catholics are really into Mary, the mother of Jesus, like they see her as sort of idol. So she was
Okay,
really into
okay,
Mary.
okay.
Her thing was she speaks to the saints. She speaks to Mary, the mother of Jesus. So, but she never spoke to Jesus, which is odd. The mother of Jesus,
She would speak to Mary, mother of Jesus, but not Jesus himself or God.
Jesus himself. So,
Oh,
which
okay.
so
Great.
you would,
Thank you. That's a good lesson to learn from. Oh, sorry, you were saying something. Continue. Sorry.
yes, now you must pay attention to these little things that we need as humans, and they say it's bad for us. They say that it's evil and stuff. And also, yeah, they isolate you, they manipulate you mentally, emotionally, physically. They sort of make you, they try to put you in a box.
It's
You
like
cannot
they want to make themselves a god to you. They
exactly.
become a god. So everything they say. Isn't that what is happening even in many churches where we
Yes.
find the leadership is being followed at the expense of God Himself? And yet, the work of the pastors, ministers is supposed to take people to Jesus Christ, for Jesus Christ is a source of healing. The other thing that I think you're speaking about that is coming out very clear, the focus on the outside, the outer beauty, the change of the behavior.
The
And yet
inside.
Jesus said very well, clean the inside of the cup and the outside will be clean. And that's many times, again, like you said earlier, one of the struggles that pastors have, you're saying, and they focus on the outside. That, truly the greater foundation of Christianity is building the inside, allowing the Holy Spirit to guide the inside. And from the inside beauty, the outside, the Samaritan woman, what did Jesus tell her? You will keep on coming to fetch water from here, but the
It's not
water I give you
a final
will
thing.
and from within it will flow to encourage other people. Wow, that's wonderful, wonderful insight. Is there anything you need to add before we now go
Yes,
to
just
why did you look for me?
one
Why
last
were you
thing.
looking for me, and how did our meeting help you?
Yes, one last thing. If anybody is looking for signs of a fake prophet, is definitely they don't encourage you to read the Bible for yourself. They read it for you and they tell you what they think they know. They don't encourage you to read it for yourself. They don't encourage you to do introspection. The way they teach you in a way that you are constantly going to them for support and not going to the Bible for support. That is the biggest red flag of them all. And yeah,
Oh,
that is the
thank
biggest red
you.
flag.
Thank you. Worshiping human beings instead of God. And how many people we know who literally go back to examine the things they've been taught to find if it is true, whether it is true or not. And so your journey, when you came and you were told about Uncle Charles, what prompted you? What prompted you to look for this?